From the headquarters of Tell Us Your English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sani Gray. In Nicaragua, a policeman has been shot dead in Managua. A government employee was killed and 3 others injured during clashes between opposition protesters and police in the city of Boaco. Jorge Gas National Technological Institute died in hospital after being shot over the weekend. The police have blamed his murder on criminal acts committed by groups of vandals. Also over the weekend, the Attorney General's office in Masaya was also burnt down. Violence from opposition groups has continued throughout the country, but the situation could improve this week as attempts are being made to resume the peace talks. A meeting between the church, the government of Daniel Ortega, and the Civil Alliance has been held to try and restart the national dialogue. The talks were suspended last Wednesday after disagreements over a call for early elections was made by the church. In the capital, Managua, protesters were seen building barricades and throwing Molotov cocktails at the police, who reportedly fired back. Nicaragua has been in a political crisis since April, when protests began against social security reforms proposed by the government. The social security reforms were later withdrawn. And our correspondent in Managua, Maria Jose Diaz, brings us more.
We can feel a tense atmosphere here in Nicaragua after opposition groups burned down the headquarters of the state radio station, La Nueva Radio Ya. There were also clashes in the National Engineering University. Meanwhile, at the Church of Our Lady of Fatima, the new commission formed by 3 members of the government and 3 from the Civic Alliance made a call to end violence by all parties and to follow 3 of the recommendations made by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights on its final report after a visit made by the organization, who were invited by the government. They also called for the end of any kind of violence against the press and to the media outlets to avoid reports that may boost violence. They also condemned the attacks against the university and La Nueva Radio Ya. The opposition ratified its commitment to joint efforts and to send a message of nonviolence and peaceful demonstrations. The government's delegation expressed their disposition to resume the national dialogue. They insisted that the dialogue needs to happen within a proper environment in order to succeed. The government added that the only way to strengthen democracy is through peace.
We thank Maria Jose Diaz for that report. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has met governors and mayors of the country at this year's first plenary session of the Federal Council of Government. The main topics of the meeting were a new national dialogue and the fight to improve the economy.
The first plenary session of the Federal Council of Government had 2 key messages. One political, about a national dialogue for peace and reconciliation, and the other economic, to fight the price of speculation. On the first theme, Nicolás Maduro called on all sectors of the country to restart a national peace process.
I want a peace agreement, a desire for peace, a peace process, just like in 2007 when Commander Chavez helped us, and there was an important period of political struggle. I want us to open a space for political dialogue, in the field of ideas, of debate, a civil conflict, healthy and democratic.
Maduro has rejected the latest sanctions imposed by the EU and has indicated that in the next few days he will release political prisoners in order to enable national dialogue. He announced that he will open a national command center to restructure all the municipal markets in the country, and he will create a special development fund to promote domestic production to move away from oil dependency.
Promote, revise, and do everything that is necessary to help our people. We have been improving production in the state of Portuguesa. We are creating conditions to enable our people to produce much more through the state's institutions, to enable us to beat this economic war.
The first plenary session is working with a new digital platform that aims to integrate the communal councils of the entire country. It is called the Cinco Communal Integration System, and the objective is to manage suggestions from the people in each municipality of the country without a single proposal being left out.
This platform will facilitate communication between each communal council and their leaders, and especially with the governor. The platform is working as a pilot project in the state of Boaco. This is where the governor has started to empower community councils. This exercise involves everyone.
More than 46,000 communal councils from all over the country will be integrated into the Cinco system.
Economic sanctions against Venezuela have been rejected by India. The Indian Minister of External Affairs, Sushma Swaraj, has said that India will not accept sanctions against Venezuela or Iran. The minister also said they are expanding their economic engagement with 23 other Latin American countries. But she also said India is not currently able to deal in cryptocurrencies.
About trading and sanctions on Venezuela, I already said we only accept United Nations sanctions and not country-specific sanctions. And regarding the cryptocurrency, we will not trade in it for now as our central bank prohibits it.
11 dissidents of the FARC guerrilla group have been killed by Colombian troops. The military operation took place on Sunday in the south of the country as people voted in the first round of the presidential election. Defense Minister Luis Carlos Villegas said the operation left 2 injured, including a minor. Villegas said the dissidents had been making threats against political actors in the region and also against an energy company. The peace agreement signed in 2016 between the government and the FARC helped disarm 7,000 of its militants in order to join the political process. The FARC is now a political party. And still in Colombia, presidential candidates Gustavo Petro and Ivan Duque are set to contest a second round of elections on June 17th. Earlier, we spoke with Dan Kovalik. He's a human rights and labor lawyer on what he saw on Sunday's elections as an international observer.
What I witnessed and what Colombian human rights leaders, told us about is that Colombia has, frankly, a very backward electoral system in which people go to a cardboard stand in which they fill out a ballot with a pen and then throw the ballot in the box. Ballots are then counted by individuals kind of left to their own devices and tallied. And there's no way to verify whether the tallies are correct, whether people voted more than one time. In fact, El Tiempo newspaper in Colombia reported a case where a guy voted 7 times. So it is not a good system compared to Venezuela, where you have to use a fingerprint to even get the election machine to go on.
Now in Paraguay, the current Vice President Alicia Pucheta will become president after Horacio Cartes' resignation. The opposition says the move would be unconstitutional. Our correspondent in Asunción, Osvaldo Zayas, brings us the details.
Alicia Pucheta will become the first female president of Paraguay if the National Congress accepts Horacio Cartes' resignation, so he can become a senator. This also depends on a decision by both Congress and the Senate. Some say Cartes can't be a regular voting senator because, according to the Constitution, former presidents must become as senators for life, who have no vote. Alicia Pucheta is also being questioned. Critics say she is being rewarded for allowing Cartes' bid for the Senate, back when she was a Supreme Court judge. For this reason, they say her appointment to the presidency could be corrupt. Women have started a social media campaign saying she does not represent them, as she will be gaining the presidency because of her agreement with Horacio Cartes. Now, all of this is in the hands of the Paraguayan Congress. If it doesn't accept Cartes' resignation, Pucheta will not be able to take office as president.
We thank Osvaldo Zayas for that report. And in Barbados, government ministers have been appointed following the election of Prime Minister Mia Mottley. To discuss the economic challenges facing Barbados and this new team, earlier we spoke with the economist Jeremy Stephen and asked whether or not the Prime Minister, who is also the Minister of Finance, is on the right track.
I think she's been doing the right things thus far in terms of how she's tried to inculcate or tried to encourage confidence in the economy. Yes, the size of the cabinet, the ministerial cabinet, has been a challenging one to sell to Barbadians. And whereas, as you said earlier, she said she wanted to focus on efficiency, I think that's the right message to put out there. But in terms of the particulars, that is, how do we deal with our debt? They during the election, were talking about debt reprofiling. And I wanted more details there because given where we are, given how many downgrades we've had as an economy, given the stagnation that we've had for a number of years, I was thinking to myself, well, we need a little more detail now because it's going to be very hard to reprofile. So maybe they're going to come up with more information. So insofar, I think what she's been trying to do is, again, to rally confidence, to make every Barbadian feel as if they have to be involved in this recovery, as opposed to government just being the ones that are supposed to lead this recovery. And insofar, people have been talking, there's been a lot more civic engagement. And that goes outside of economics. There's a confidence, there's an interest, there's an active interest in what's going on in Barbados. So again, I think it's the right start, but again, I'm giving them 100 days to see how they manage this and if they give way more detail as to the tough decisions that they're going to have to make, like reducing expenditure, which may very well lead to job cuts. But one would hope the private sector picks up the excess labor in time. I really don't know. So again, I'm giving them 100 days before I really begin to nail them to the cross, if they need to be nailed.
We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Relatives of a 19-year-old Guatemalan, Claudia Gomez, who was shot dead last week by a U.S. Border Patrol officer, are mourning the loss of their loved one and are calling for justice. Gomez, who was an accountant, grew up in the eastern village of San Juan Ostuncal and went to the United States in search of a better life. She was shot last Wednesday in South Texas by an officer who opened fire on a group of migrants. Her family is asking for help returning Claudia's body to her hometown.
I will earn something. I will for my studies, she said. But unfortunately, she was unable to achieve that. My poor little baby. My little baby. No, 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 this can't be. My baby is simply gone. That's how it is. I want justice for my baby because it's not fair that they do this. If people are able to help me to fetch my baby's body as soon as possible, that's what I want. We can't do anything now. She's dead. She's dead.
And a trucker strike paralyzing fuel, goods and food deliveries across Brazil has continued for an 8th day, despite President Michel Temer's decision to lower fuel costs. Roadblocks have remained in place across 24 of the country's 27 states, despite armed soldiers escorting fuel trucks since Friday. Lines continue at gas stations, many supermarkets are struggling to source food, and 8 airports have run out of aviation fluid. Hospitals in Rio de Janeiro have been forced to cancel non-urgent operations.
I have the absolute conviction that between today and tomorrow, all of us, brothers, and of course those in the so-called strike, which their leaders have now recommended to cease, I am certain that all of this will bring a lot of peace.
There are almost no shops open because there is no merchandise. The goods do not arrive. So there is little, but the price is high, and so there are almost no customers.
The truckers are right. For a country that, not that long ago, was one of the first in the world, there is far too much corruption. They're right. It must stop. I support them.
And our correspondent Adriana Rebreño has the latest from Brasilia.
It's been 9 days since the truckers' strike began, but the government of Michel Temer has not yet found a solution. Local media outlets say demonstrators will take to the streets in around 20 states around the country. This means truck drivers will remain on the main highways and roads, although they are no longer stopping circulation. In an attempt to end with the strike, Temer announced a reduction of the diesel price for 60 days, after an agreement with drivers' representatives. But most of the truckers do not feel represented by the group that made the agreement. That is why they say they will continue to strike. For the citizens and many experts, this is the result of the pricing policies that the government are developing with the state oil company Petrobras. Oil workers say they will also protest, starting tomorrow, for 72 hours. They are asking the head of Petrobras, Pedro Parente, to resign and for a new pricing policy to be settled. They are also asking for fuel and diesel price to be lowered, and for the state oil company not to be privatized. The situation is normalizing in some states and here in the capital, although 10 airports are unable to operate because they can't get aviation fuel.
Clashes erupted in the Chilean capital Santiago between students and security forces during a protest against police violence. The rally took place on Monday evening and clashes were repeated this morning. Students from the National Institute of Chile and their parents protested against their violent eviction from a university building last Thursday by the police. The building was occupied by representatives of a student movement against sexual harassment and violence on campus. The eviction resulted in 10 people being arrested and 3 injured. Students are urging the head of the university to resign. Around a dozen Chilean universities have been occupied during the last weeks to demand an end to violence against women. And protests continue in Bolivia over a freeze on university funding. The protests have grown following the death of a student at a rally last week. Clashes erupted in the center-western city of Cochabamba on Monday. Protests started 2 weeks ago, led by students from the Public University of El Alto, urging the Bolivian government to increase its education budget. The university has 43,000 students, most of them in need of financial support. Meanwhile, Bolivian President Evo Morales says the protests are an attempt to encourage violence and to overthrow him.
I have been hearing in the media recently, Interior Minister Carlos Romero is a killer. Evo is a killer. In case you don't remember, in 2002, they accused me of being a killer to kick me out of the National Congress. Surely they are accusing me of being a killer to kick me out of government. So history repeats itself. There's no making this up.
In Mexico, people living near an active volcano have been warned that it could soon erupt. A team from the National Autonomous University issued the alert to nearly 500,000 people living within 25 kilometers of the Popocatépetl volcano. The experts updated the volcano risk map and upgraded the likelihood of an eruption. Popo, as it is popularly called, has been active since the mid-1990s. In 2000, 50,000 people had to be evacuated after a massive eruption.
Time is running out with respect to the change of a new large eruption of the Popocatépetl volcano. We know this because we also have a history of eruptions occurring following similar factors.
What we have presented today is the result of a series of studies that allows us to establish the dangers of the volcano. We can assess the probability of certain areas that could be reached by volcanic material if there were to be an eruption.
Archaeologists have discovered more than 25 giant drawings known as geoglyphs near the Nazca lines in southern Peru. A group of archaeologists used drones to search the area. The huge sketches of a whale, a woman and a monkey are thought to have been made by the Paracas people more than 2,000 years ago. The Nazca lines are designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site. They are a series of geoglyphs in the Nazca Desert with around 1,000 ancient drawings.
Next to these figures, we have identified new figures, mainly anthropomorphic motifs that belong to a time before the famous Nazca lines. We are now talking about a tradition of making geoliths that began approximately around the 500 BC. That is, at the end of the development of the Paracas culture, when they began to draw a series of anthropomorphic motifs on the hillsides.
We're going to take another short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Israeli aircraft have attacked Palestinian bases on the Gaza Strip. Gaza security forces said 4 military bases were hit. Israeli forces claimed they responded after a barrage of mortars and rockets were fired from the Palestinian enclave. The attacks follow weeks of protests and repression along the Israel-Gaza border. Since the end of March, at least 130 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli gunfire, with 65 killed just on May 14th, the day the United States opened its embassy in Jerusalem. And in a peaceful demonstration, Palestinians have launched boats from the seaport in Gaza City to protest against Israel's sea blockade of the coastal enclave. 2 boats carrying around 30 people, including some who were wounded by the Israeli forces in recent attacks, were aiming to move beyond the 16-kilometer limit imposed off the coast. Other boats protested within the limit imposed by Israel. The 11-year-old siege on Gaza has prevented medical supplies from getting in and patients from leaving. A man has killed 2 police officers and a woman passersby in the Belgian city of Liège. Images on social media showed people rushing for safety in Liège's central boulevard de Avroy, with shots and sirens being heard in the background. The assailant was later shot dead by police in an exchange of gunfire. The alleged attacker has been identified as a 36-year-old Belgian who was released on parole from prison near the city a day before. The Spanish Prime Minister Mariano Rajoy is facing a vote of no confidence after members of his party were convicted of corruption.
Mariano Rajoy could stop being Spain's president next Friday when Congress votes on the censorship motion presented against him by the Socialist Party. This initiative was presented after the sentence of the Boaco corruption case. The PP was condemned as responsible for misusing 245,000 euros.
This is a censorship motion to get the rules of the game back. Rules that have been violated by a party that has altered elections for decades.
To put this motion to work, socialists need support from a majority of the parliament, 176 officials. Until now, they have 84 representatives and 62 supporters from Unidos Podemos. Their goal is to push the Popular Party, or PP, out of the government for corruption and to establish a new social plan for the country.
Spain needs to guarantee pensions. It needs payment equality, parenthood rights for both women and men. We need to control the housing market to make sure that people can live with dignity. Spain needs dialogue to solve the territorial issues.
The parties are compromising, and it's possible that Nueva Canarias could support this project. However, Pedro Sánchez will need more supporters. The conservative members of Ciudadanos have already said they will prefer to call for elections, and it might be difficult to get support from the nationalists. But in the end, no option is good for PP.
This motion is bad for Spain and its people. It creates uncertainty and hurts all citizens.
The president has until Friday to convince the majority of the parliament that stability comes with the Popular Party and not with the socialists, who could have a chance to name Pedro Sánchez as the next president of Spain.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at tellusyourtv.net/English. You should also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sweeney Gray. Thank you so much for watching.